Okay, caveman again. Had a customer take an ask. I think I had it on one video once before in reference how to install some of these, the tune-up kits, and which is, you know, the brushes or the pickups and the bulbs and putting wide tires where narrow tires came from. So the best way for me to show you is to just more or less walk through it, and that's all this video is going to be about, is trying to install the tires and rims and such that you need to take and convert one. Now, one thing for sure, Artin cars are pretty much all about the same as far as that goes, and when it comes to how they're designed. So when I first start pulling it apart, you'll see that it's pretty simple stuff. You know, pulling back on the tires to remove them. All right, not too hard to take and do. Some of them can be a little bit sticky. The back one sometimes, depending on the axle that you have, will be a little tougher to pull off, but you should be able to take and just ease them right on off. Okay, which brings the car down to this: no wheels or no tires on it. Okay, if once in a while you'll be able to grab, not always, both of these here rims on the front, twist and get it to break loose. Now I got it to break loose, okay, but there has been many times where that sucker wasn't moving. Okay, so I twist it back and forth and one side comes off, and of course that comes out. All right, pretty much simple like that, right? Okay, so we've got the front axle out of the way, so I'm going to take one thing at a time. I'm going to dump out this kit that would be just like the one that you would purchase, depending on the style of wheel and tire that you wanted to put on your car or you were changing. In some cases you don't need to replace the axles at all. You're just putting on new tires, maybe replacing the motor, etc. Okay, here's the front axle for a wider front tire. Okay, same thing. Grab it and see if you can twist it. If you can, great. It pops apart just like you've seen. All right, pretty easy. But if you can't, you're going to have to grab it on both sides with pliers and just tweak it. And as soon as it pops loose, you'll feel it. Then you should be able to grab it with your hands. Don't, you know, mar this up a lot because it'll kind of mess up how the tire sits there for you. All right, putting the new one on, pretty simple really. Just slides into place depending on exactly where you want to put it. There's 3 positions for most all Artin chassis. Slide this one here on. Okay, getting the tires that came with the kit. All right, and sliding them in place. If for some reason you put it on and it just doesn't look right, okay, or doesn't want to go on there right, well, you know, look at that. There's a big difference in how one side looks compared to the other. This here tire was just put on backwards, so flip it over. And there you go. All right, spin them once, just make sure. If these here, the rims here, go way tight against the body here, okay, pull them back a little bit. In this case, it's running nice and free, and that's what it should take and do. All right. Now, the back. The back is a pain in the butt because of the crown gear, okay? There's no real super simple way to take and do this or even to take and explain it. But we're going to walk through it and see what we can take and come up with. Now, to get the motor out, all right, once again, I've mentioned before that these 2 plastic tabs can break, one on each side, all right? That is what holds that motor in place from moving. If it's moving, it'll slide away from the crown gear and will actually take and cause a problem, and you won't be able to take and run the car. But if they do break, slide the motor back in place, throw some hot glue here, just a dab here, and a dab on the other side right where that tab came from. Let it cool off a little bit, and it will hold it just fine. It doesn't take a lot of strength to take and do that. Putting a piece of tape around it and stuff will hold it, but it looks kind of ugly, and it just doesn't work that well. Anyway, if you go up under here instead of taking and trying to pry on these tabs at the back, right, if you go right up under the car and ease up, just a little bit with a flat tip, one side, just ease it up a little bit. On this side, do the same thing. And you'll notice that the motor kind of popped up a little bit and it just comes out. Pretty easy, right? Notice that on the bottom here, these here 2 tabs is where it makes contact. And here, when you put the motor back in, they have to be facing down. If they're facing up, the motor won't get any power. Is that pretty simple? Because it actually will take and pop into place because the contacts are on the same side that hold the motor down, but it won't have any power. All right, now that that's out of the way, now we got the rear axle, right, that's showing itself. Now the same thing happens here, is try to grab it and see if you can get it to twist. 99% of the time that is just not going to happen with the rear, because I just never had it happen that easy with the rear ones. So some people will take and do it a lot of different ways. Some will take and try to grab it from the inside here, all right, and take and grab it like that and try to twist. It doesn't work. Again, once again, you got to have some kind of pliers, and that's one thing that I didn't take and set there before I started this video. And let's see what we got here. Well, that should work. Maybe. All right, so once again, we're trying to take and get this thing to break loose, and so grabbing that axle and twisting it even with those pliers on there, not so easy. But if you'll listen when I take and go to grab it, in fact I need to take and use a different set of pliers for this to make it simpler, but if you grab it, did you hear that click? I don't know if you could hear it. Anyway, it broke loose. One of these are looser than the other, so we're going to find out which one it is. Now, I start twisting it. I can tell that it's going to be this one here that comes off. And I pull it off out of the way. So finally it came off, and kind of like the front, the rim is off. But on this side, it's still there. Now, you can see that crown gear here doesn't let this thing go all the way out. So it kind of makes it a pain in the butt. Now, there's a few ways you might take and get around doing it as far as it goes. I suggest using a small piece of wood. And it's not because you need wood to do it. It just kind of helps that axle not slide around so much, okay? So taking this end right here, all right, if I push this way, right, I'm pushing against the gears. If I push the other direction, I'm sliding it against this here back peg. Now, it can be done either way. Taking the one off is one thing. Putting the other one on is another. But if I put that axle against it and then I push down, you'll notice that it clicked a little bit. And if I pull, I can pull that out. All right. Now, you don't want to get all crazy about it as far as it goes and just pull like you're taking a lug nut off of an old truck. But you'll hear it take and move and stuff, and it'll take and pop loose. Now, the one thing that it's hard to take and see, I don't know if you can on this video, but right about there, there's an etch mark that is on this here axle. That is where the crown gear rides. If it's not right on there, the crown gear may take and slip. It may not, but more than likely it will slip if it's not on that little etched mark that kind of makes it a little bit rougher there. Okay, so now we've pulled off that complete item as far as the back axle, and you have a slot car that has, whoop, there it is, no rear axle. All right, now the kits will come like this. All right, once again the same thing happens. Okay, in this case, look at that, popped right off. Not in every case will it. All right. All right, so we want to determine, because we do know that when this is in place, that's how, if you'll notice, there's a little bit more space on this side of where the crown gear sets than this side. So that crown gear is supposed to take a point like so. And that will take and be, all the cars are exactly the same. That's how it has to set, all right? Now, we need to get this crown gear off so we can take and put it into this car. Same basic rule. The only thing is that the only way we're going to get this to come off, right, is to take and get it slid completely off of that, not this direction. Need this thing adjusted more. Not this direction, but this direction off. So we have basically an axle by itself to slide in. Now, let's see, am I getting that right? See if I can get a little closer. Okay. Now, this isn't necessarily the tool to use, but it's the ones that I use. In fact, I'll use a little bit larger one, not because it's stronger, but just a little bit thicker as far as the tips. And what I'm going to take and do is put pressure here. As you can see, those needle noses are on both sides. I'm not squeezing the axle. I'm just using it to take and put equal pressure on both sides of that, the crown gear. Okay. Now, when I push on it, right, again on the wood, all right, it'll slide, and it did. The rest of it comes right off. Now, this one's even harder to see as far as those little marks, but they're there, barely can see them, okay? Now, the axle can't just go in like so and be left alone, simply because there's no gear in there. Now, we know that the gear, this is important, goes this direction and sets just like that, okay? All right, now you can see that when I push this here axle in, it's going to put pressure right here, not against the gears, and that's the good way to take and do it. So when you start to push on this, all right, you're going to ease into it. You're not going to force it real fast. You got to take your time, because it has to marry up with, whoops, it has to marry up with that little hole so it comes all the way out. Now I've already started pushing it on, and I do know that it only goes in so far, of course. And what I want to try to do is kind of more or less take and make sure that I've got this thing centered. Now, the only real way I'm going to know that that's centered is to take and set the motor back in there. All right, again, the contacts go down. It slides into place like so. All right. And I can even see by looking at it that it's pretty darn close to being right. So I'm going to take and go ahead and pop it into place. Okay, it's in place now. Next thing is you check this just to see how it turns back and forth. If it turns freely, you know, I don't mean spin like a big old nice bearing, but you can tell. Okay, if it spins like that, you got it in place, and you're not going to have any problems with it. Now your back tires, of course, will go back on just like the front ones did in a sense. It's no real difference. In this case, they're just a little bit wider. Okay. Now, depending on the car, the chassis that you have, if you put this here same exact setup with the wider tires, and you notice that these front tires are a little bit wider this way, okay? And comparing it to this one, let me just pop these on there real quick, if I can. Takes a little bit of monkeying with to get them exactly in place. Whoops, put the wrong one on there. There it is. Alright, so much for doing that quickly. Okay, it's being ornery. Alright, got the two tires on, but what you'll notice, okay, is some cars, the axles, there's a little bit more width there. Now, will that work for your exact model of your chassis that you're using, or the body that you're using? On a car like this one, yes. No question at all. But this car was modified, okay, with the same setup as you can see, all right, but it had the other wheels on it. And I just took and put the wider wheels on there so I could take and use it for, you know, what I was doing. I was modifying this one here. So one of my first cars. So now that we've, you know, I've shown you how you could replace the motor, replacing the axles and such, right? And the brushes, or the pickups, are pretty simple also. If you take a flat tip screwdriver, you can pop it in there, and you can see those little tabs bouncing back and forth there. We just bring them over, okay, and they come out. Right? Now, if you'll notice, these are a little bit bent a little bit, right? To get them to go in there perfectly, you could take a pair of pliers and just straighten these out a little bit to where they look like, let's see here, just like that. All right. Notice that even though it seems like maybe they would go this, maybe they would go this way, the brush itself should fold back. So when you go to take and put this on there, you'll notice that that's the correct way they should look as you're putting them on. All right. In other words, that brad sticking out to the front. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Now that you've got it in there, and you look over on the other side, and you'll notice that those tabs are sticking up, and all you have to do is fold them over onto the brass plate that's there. Okay. Push it back down, and basically you're done. You want to take and maybe clean them up a little bit, fold them back over. You don't always have to do that, but depending on where that axle sits, it may be in the way. So that's basically the way you take and do it. So if you do have any questions, or it's driving you out of your mind, feel free to take and ask. Just send me a message at 123 Caveman. I'm only doing that not to advertise, but that's where you can find me if you have a question. Thank you.